The first time he said it, the room went silent like the world itself had tripped and forgotten how to breathe. His voice had been tired, cracked from sleepless nights and unpaid bills, and the word slipped out before he could catch it, soft, instinctive, almost broken. "Baby, wait." And she did. The millionaire everyone feared, the woman whose name could close deals or destroy lives with a single call, stopped in her tracks, turned slowly, and smirked like she had just discovered a secret she wasn't supposed to know. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet miracles hidden in ordinary lives, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Echoes the Stories. Because some stories don't just entertain, they remind us who we are. Arman Halim had not meant to say it. Words like that belonged to another life, a life that had ended 3 years ago in a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and loss. Since then, his world had shrunk to the size of a small rented apartment and the tiny hand of his daughter, Meher, who still believed her father could fix anything, even when he couldn't fix himself. He worked nights at a warehouse on the outskirts of the city, stacking boxes until his back burned and his hands trembled. During the day, he chased odd jobs, repairing broken fans, delivering groceries, sometimes even cleaning offices where people didn't bother to look at him twice. Life had reduced him to survival, each day a negotiation between exhaustion and responsibility. That morning, everything had gone wrong. Meher had a fever again, the kind that made her cheeks flush and her eyes too heavy for a child who loved to laugh. The landlord had left a notice on the door, final warning. The pharmacy had refused to give him medicine without payment. And the school had called, gently reminding him that unpaid fees meant Meher might not be allowed back next term. So Arman had done the only thing left. He had walked into a place where men like him didn't belong. The glass building shimmered under the sunlight, tall and cold and unforgiving. Inside, everything gleamed, floors polished enough to reflect his worn shoes, walls decorated with art that probably cost more than his entire life savings. This was the headquarters of Alara Group, owned by Sanya Ramani, the youngest self-made millionaire in the country, a woman known not just for her success but for her ruthlessness. He wasn't supposed to see her. He had come to deliver a package, a simple courier job, but fate, like it often does, had other plans. A mix-up at the reception, a distracted assistant, and suddenly Arman found himself stepping into an elevator reserved for executives only. By the time he realized the mistake, the doors had already closed. When they opened again, she was there. Sanya Ramani stood at the far end of the hallway, speaking to two men in suits who nodded at every word she said. She was not what Arman expected. Not soft, not warm, not even traditionally kind. There was something sharp about her presence, like glass, beautiful but capable of cutting. He should have turned back. But Meher's fever, the landlord's notice, and the crushing weight of failure pushed him forward. He didn't even remember what he planned to say. All he knew was that he needed help, and somehow, impossibly, she was the only person in front of him. He called out, his voice cracking under pressure, and when she didn't stop, panic rushed in. That was when the word slipped out. "Baby, wait." The moment shattered everything. The men beside her froze. The hallway seemed to tighten. Even the air felt heavier. Arman's heart dropped into his stomach as reality hit him like a wave. He had just addressed one of the most powerful women in the city with a word that belonged to intimacy, to love, to something he had no right to. But instead of anger, instead of the fury he expected, she smirked. She dismissed the men with a flick of her hand, her eyes never leaving Arman. Then she walked toward him, slow and deliberate, like she was studying a puzzle she intended to solve. "Say it again," she said, her voice calm but edged with something unreadable. Slower. Arman felt his throat close. Shame burned through him, but so did desperation. He stammered, trying to explain, trying to apologize, but words failed him the way they often do when they matter most. That should have been the end of it. Security should have dragged him out. His mistake should have cost him the job, maybe even more. But Sanya Ramani did something no one expected. She listened. Not just to his broken explanation, but to the silence between his words. She noticed the trembling in his hands, the exhaustion in his eyes, the way he kept glancing at his phone like it held the answer to something urgent. When he finally managed to speak clearly, he told her everything. Not as a plea, not as a performance, but as a man who had run out of options. He told her about Meher, the way she used to laugh before her mother died, the way she tried to be brave even when she was scared. He told her about the fever, the unpaid bills, the nights he stayed awake just to make sure she was breathing. And when he finished, he didn't ask for money. He asked for work. Real work. Something stable. Something that would let him keep his daughter safe. Sanya didn't respond immediately. She studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she asked a question that caught him off guard. "Why did you call me that?" Arman hesitated. The truth felt too fragile to say out loud, but he said it anyway. Because for a second, he had forgotten where he was. Because exhaustion had stripped away the boundaries between past and present. Because the word baby used to belong to someone who made everything feel safe, and for one brief, accidental moment, his mind had reached for comfort where none existed. Sanya's smirk faded, replaced by something quieter. And that was where everything began to change. She didn't give him money. She gave him a chance. It started small, a temporary position in the building's maintenance team. Nothing glamorous, nothing extraordinary. But it was steady. It paid enough to keep the landlord quiet, enough to buy medicine, enough to breathe again. For Arman, it felt like a lifeline. Days turned into weeks, and something unexpected happened. Sanya noticed him. Not in the way people usually notice others, not as a background figure, not as a passing face, but with intention. She saw how he worked without complaint, how he stayed late when others left, how he fixed problems before they were even reported. And slowly, she began to ask questions. About Meher. About his past. About the life he had lost and the one he was trying to rebuild. At first, Arman kept his answers short, guarded. But there was something about the way she listened, really listened, that made it harder to stay closed off. And Meher. Meher changed everything. The first time Sanya met her, it was by accident. Arman had no choice but to bring her to work when the daycare refused to keep her without payment. He expected trouble, maybe even dismissal. Instead, Sanya crouched down to Meher's level and asked her what she liked. "Stories," Meher said, her voice soft but certain. From that day on, Sanya started bringing books. It was a small gesture, almost insignificant in the grand scheme of her world, but to Meher, it was everything. And to Arman, it was proof that kindness could still exist in places he least expected. But not everything was easy. Whispers began to spread through the office. People noticed the way Sanya treated Arman differently, the way she paused to speak to him, the way she asked about his daughter. In a world built on hierarchy and distance, their connection didn't make sense. Rumors grew. Judgment followed. And one day, it all came crashing down. A board member confronted Sanya, questioning her decisions, her judgment, her professionalism. They didn't say Arman's name, but they didn't have to. The implication was clear. She had crossed a line. For the first time, Arman realized the cost of her kindness. And it terrified him. That night, he made a decision. He went to her office, the same place where everything had started, and told her he would leave. Not because he wanted to, but because he couldn't be the reason she lost everything she had built. Sanya listened, just like she had that first day. But this time, when she spoke, there was no smirk, no distance. Only honesty. She told him that success meant nothing if it cost her humanity. She told him that people like him, the ones who kept going when everything fell apart, were the reason the world still had hope. And then she said something that stayed with him forever. "Say it again." Arman looked at her, confused. "The word," she said softly. "The one you said that day." He hesitated, but something in her eyes gave him courage. "Baby." This time, it didn't feel like a mistake. It felt like something else entirely. Not romance, not even love, not yet. But something real. Something human. Months passed, and life began to settle into something that almost felt like peace. Meher's laughter returned. The bills stopped piling up. Arman found stability, not just in work, but in himself. And Sanya, she changed too. Not in a way that made her weaker, but in a way that made her whole. She still ran her empire with precision and strength, but now, there was warmth where there had once been only steel. Their lives didn't merge into a perfect story. There were still challenges, still doubts, still moments where the past threatened to pull them back. But they kept choosing to move forward. Together. And maybe that was the point. Not perfection. Not fairy tales. But the quiet, stubborn decision to keep going, even when it's hard. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of someone you've lost or someone you're still fighting for, take a moment to like, share, and let your voice be heard. Because stories like this live on through you. And before you go, here's something special. Comment the word hope if you believe that even the smallest acts of kindness can change a life.